Hey, Dr. Rob, we've got a lot of questions ready for you. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is what is the difference between the manner in which sex addicts love versus the way non-sex addict healthy people love?
Great question. Um, Addicts, all addicts, not just sex addicts, but all of us, we don't love fully. We split our love into pieces. And most generally, what sex and love well, sex acts in particular, what we love is our home, having a family, having a foundation, that is right there where we need it whenever we need it. But at the same time, we also love doing whatever it is we want to do, when we want to do it, and how we want to do it, because um, that is where we run with our feelings and emotions. So basically, we do love our families. And how do I know this? Because most of the men and women who act out here will blame you. They'll be like, oh, well, my wife isn't this, my husband isn't that, and why are you nagging me, and blah, blah, blah. But the minute any of you partners take one step away from us, even an inch, about talk about leaving, or boy, do we run after you. So what I know is we're deeply connected to you. It's just that we have to block it out to go do what we want to do. I mean, you can't actively be hurting someone and feel your love for them at the same time. So what we do is we devalue our relationships, we push away the family, we distance ourselves from the love in our heads, and we turn towards something else, sex, whatever that. And then when that's done, we run back to our home for the love. So home is really about, it's sort of like mom and dad, that's home. But how I and life is split into pieces. So what I would say is they don't fully love you. They love you in equal part to being free and getting what they want to do, doing what they want to do. And the real question is, what happens when one gets in the way of the other? And this is when couples come get help is, I know I love this person, but I've ruined their life. Or you say you love me, but look what you did. And that's usually when people say, I need to get some help.
And we're happy to help them. Okay, so the next question, Dr. Rob, is what is avoidance attachment style and how can I get past that and have healthy relationships?
Well, okay. Those are more than one question, I think. I'm writing things down is what I'm
Yes.
doing, just so you know.
Avoidant attachment style. What is
So,
it?
so I don't know if you're a therapist, then I fully believe that you probably understand all this and you're just asking questions generally. But if you're not a therapist and haven't studied this stuff, there's different ways of looking at what you're talking about. So some people are born distant, shy, uncomfortable with closeness. They're just born that way. That's their personality. Some people are born warm and can, you just know from the time they're babies. Some sleep through the night and some are difficult. So on some level, some people are born who have a very difficult time bonding, connecting with parents, bonding, connect, because they're just natively anxious or fearful or whatever. That's kind of avoidant attachment when early in life, 2 years, 1 year, 6 months, you notice that that child will tend to sit back rather than coming toward, that they will not be upset when they're alone, that they're kind of more independent and they don't move toward you in the ways that a child who is as warm and engaged. So there are different attachment styles, by the way. They're ambivalent attachment where you sometimes, but adults, we don't generally talk about the type of attachment. We're mostly talking about children. When we talk about adults who are disconnected from the love they have or disconnected their lives, yes, it is an attachment problem, but more often it comes out of trauma, not who the person is, but what's happened to them and how they had to choose to live and are still living. So the way to healthier relationships, I'm going to leave that one to you, Tammy, because everyone asks that question. What is the way out of avoidance and moving toward connection?
Being willing to take a step in vulnerability. That's my best answer because it's really easy to remain protected with the Kevlar vest on and go stay away. But if I want to have something different, I have to be willing to take a step into vulnerability. I would really invite you. Troy Love is doing his webinar this week, Wednesday at 9:30 Pacific time. He's all about attachment wounds. Dr. Rob talked about there's trauma, there's something there. And I would really invite you to connect on that level too.
There's also a podcast that I do called Sex, Love, and Addiction. And it's not a vanity podcast. Cami told me we just surpassed 650,000.
600,000. Yeah.
So that many people are curious and trying to understand infidelity and relationships and addiction and all of that. And the reason I bring up the podcast is that we have one with a man by the name of Dr. Stan Tatkin,
his is good
Tatkin.
too.
He
Yeah.
did one of the, he is a specialist in attachment and intimacy. And we have a great discussion on that particular podcast about why do we marry? What is a marriage about? What should our commitments be? What is love? What does it mean to love? You know, all of those things. And I think even if you just listen to one of them, I would pick that one up because it really directly relates to your question. And I agree with Tammy. Healthy relationships involve transparency. You see, if I'm lying to you, two things, if you don't mind, Tammy. Number one, if I'm lying to you consistently about my behavior, and then you say to me what I always want people to say, you're wonderful, I really care about you, you're so great, for whatever reason, I don't believe them. Because in my head, I know what I've been doing. And so I have a really good reason to say it's nice that they think that about me, but I don't think that about me. Because if they knew what I was doing, so we cut ourselves out off from the love that we might get. And so being intimate, what Tammy's talking about, is not about sex. It's about revealing yourself. I don't think that our partners, as angry as they are, ever feel closer to us on some level than when we tell them everything we've done and everything. I've had a lot of partners say, I freaking hate everything you said, but I feel relieved. Like, at least I know what's going on. At least I understand. And some of them actually feel closer, not about the content of what you did, but the fact that they now know who you are and they're not in the dark anymore. So a good relationship over time is about letting someone fully know who you are. But I want to say this because Tammy will want to make sure I say it, not dumping on them, not going home and saying, okay, we're going to be intimate and close if I just tell them everything right now, because that's just being a jerk. Because what you're doing is you're making yourself feel better. We can only talk to our spouses about all this when they have support, when they have a therapist, when they have a community. Otherwise, you're going to tell them things that might, you hope are going to make things better and are going to make you feel better, but ultimately might destroy the person that you've already been hurting.
Okay, next question. Do sex addicts deep in addiction have less capacity to love versus sex addicts attempting to abstain in recovery?
Yes. Because here, look at it this way. What the question is, do you think somebody who's getting drunk all the time has a lesser capacity to love me than someone who's sober? Do you think somebody who is gambling and gaming and distracting themselves and they're spending 6 hours a day on the computer, do you think that person has less of a capacity to love me? Of course, because if my primary emotional and intellectual attachment is to my behavior, my sex, my porn, then you always come in second. I do absolutely believe that the most active sex addict most often does have intact love, intact values. But here's a good way to look at it. I say this a lot. I've worked with meth addicts who had kids who took their kids' college fund to buy drugs. And you think, God, that's the most narcissistic, awful how could they do that? But when they got sober, because they can grow then, when they have worked 3 jobs to pay that back. So you can see that their values and the meaning of their children is intact. But when their focus is getting to that drug, they don't care about anyone else. They just got to get to that drug. And so the refocusing on you and the relationship, I mean, that's where the healing is. So Tammy's absolutely right.
Well, and one of the things that I want to clarify, though, it takes time. Because I hear attempting to abstain and in recovery. So if it's really early on, I don't know. I don't think you're going to see a real noticeable difference. Super early on, they don't have any of the skills yet. So it's going to take time for everything to clear out and, to get help to be able to look at the things that they've been doing and to kind of reconnect or connect in a very different way. So it'll take time.
I want to say something about that, Tammy. I was talking to a couple recently, and this man is an alcoholic and he's a porn addict, he's a sex addict, and they've been married a long time. And he recently, about a year or so ago, decided to stop drinking. And he says he stopped the affairs and the sexing. Who knows? I don't even know if he stopped drinking because addicts, lie. But my point is that when he got on this session, his wife said, something doesn't feel right to me. I know he says he's trying. And he said, I've stopped drinking. I've stopped sexing. What's the problem? The problem is that those are the symptoms. That's the part of the iceberg that's above the water, but the emotional engine that drives addiction requires us to open it up, take some of the pressure out, redo the oil, the spark plugs. You can't. So his belief was, if I stop, then everything will get better. And the reality is, if you stop, you're still a jerk. It's just you're a jerk who doesn't do that anymore. If you want to learn how to be a loving, connected, meaningful, non-hypocritical, intimate person, it has to be evolved in you by people who are already on the way. And that's why we do treatment, by the way. We have a treatment center, not because we're going to fix anyone, but part of what we do is wake them up. Just, do you say that you love this person, but look what you've been doing. And I said to the spouse, Tammy, and I will say this to all the spouses here, the woman I talked to recently about her husband, I asked her, what would be the boundary around which you would take an action, like leave him or move on, or what is your boundary? And she said, if he ever does this again. I'm like, well, how would you know? He lies to you. He's lied to you for years. So she really would never know if he did it again, except she might feel uncomfortable. So how do you know if somebody's really on a path? Because you don't know anything they're really doing, because addicts lie. And the simple thing is, it's not about what an addict is not doing, it's about what they are doing. Did they commit to go to treatment? Did they commit to go to therapy? Did they commit to 12-step meetings? Are they in a men's group? And do they do all of this not because you're nagging them or you're saying, but because they are showing motivation and commitment? That, to me, I cannot judge any addict on their words or their gifts or their kindness or their sweetness, because they want to get me back. They are manipulative, they're seductive, and as good as it may feel in the moment, sometimes in that moment when they're seductive and charming, we forget how much we've been hurt and how deep the damage is. And then when they say they're going to work on it, they're going to stop, we get hopeful. But if these men and women had the ability to change themselves because they love you or the marriage or whatever it is, they would have done that already. The people we work with do not have the tools or the skill set or the direction to change their lives. They may want to, but this person, I promise you, is going to go back to drinking and sexing if he isn't already, because he doesn't know anything about what's beneath that top of that iceberg. And there's a lot of pressure. By the way, if you don't work on yourself, then addiction is whack-a-mole, which means alcohol pops up, I knock that down. Then work pops up, I knock that down. Then the sex pops up, because we are constantly looking for a way to escape. And you can't just stop and say, I did it, because something else, I promise you, is going to come up and be a problem. Eating, whatever that is. So Tammy, thoughts? I don't mean to go on and on.
No, that was very comprehensive. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I've played
Okay.
whack-a-mole a few times. So.
I know. Well, I was thinking, because I started asking people and I go, food, gaming, and oh yeah. Yeah. So like it is very much, one form of escape or another. So until we address the underlying issues, we in around 12-step, it's happy, joyous, and free. You cannot be happy, joyous, and free if you're just constantly running from one acting out form to another. So.
And you cannot be happy and joyous and free if you're living a lie.
True.
Because you know it. Forget what other people, you know it.
Next question. How long until no empathy becomes a red flag? My husband and I had discovery 17 months ago. He has had multiple relapses since. We had a full disclosure in June of this year. His last relapse was supposedly this past August. I'm suspicious that he was acting out more recent than that. His therapist has said that he thinks my husband is in good recovery because he is being more honest with his feelings and opening up to the guys in the group. I have yet to see and feel any empathy towards me. We spent a lot of time in marriage counseling over the past few months, and I just recently asked to take a break from marriage counseling because it was too painful to keep opening up about my pain and get lackluster responses, if any at all. He is so disconnected. It feels like he is listening to he is so disconnected that it feels like he is listening to a stranger tell a story that has nothing to do with us. His words have zero emotion behind them and sound empty. How long can I keep hearing from his CSAT? That's for those of you joining,
Therapist.
that's a therapist that's got special training, that he is making progress, but not seeing any empathy begin. That's painful. So thank you for sharing that.
So I guess, first of all, I want to say we hear this a lot, Tammy and I, which is basically my spouse is working on the acting out. I think there seem to be good therapy, good 12-step. I really believe they've stopped, or at least I'm hopeful, but they're still a jerk. And how can it be that they're working so hard to not do something, to not hurt our relationship, to make things better, but they're still difficult, irritable, narcissistic, whatever it is. And we hear this a lot from spouses. And I guess part of what I want to say to you guys is, if we were emotionally sophisticated, we wouldn't do the things we do. We're very broken. So yes, we can start the beginning of maturity. Oops. Oh,
Oh,
Oh, I have 10% left. Okay, so 10%.
okay. I was gonna say, I can hear ya.
Oh, okay. Well, I think we're switching. So can you hear me? And now I don't remember what, something about actions, not words, I think is where I was. I know we're both a certain age.
I was gonna
We
say, I
forget
just
things.
got
I'm so glad that isn't just me.
Yeah,
But
no, I was just like, I got so focused on your earpods.
So progress means what they're doing, not what they're saying. No spouse can rely on, well, I'm doing better and I feel better and I'm not doing these things. And, that's this, the lips are moving. But are they doing the things that you've been told, or or you read about? And by the way, all of those things, to your avoidant attachment piece, all of the things that we need to do to get better have to do with connection. Asking people for help, relying on other people, showing up for other people, being there for other people, but not in romantic and sexual ways. In many ways, we need to learn how to be a decent human being, because we haven't been, and even if someone was nice and kind and sweet, they were also hurting you and letting you down and lying to you. And by the way, a lot of partners parse that sometimes, like, no, he really is this person. He's not really that person, or she. No. We are one person. If we do this, we do that, it's the same person. You can't look at us like we're good and we're bad. I am someone who's deeply split and broken, and I can walk forward and hurt you and not think twice about it. And then in the same day, come back home and say, I love you, I care about you, and this is the most important thing, because I'm deeply broken. Yeah.
So the challenge with this one, though, is he appears to be getting kudos from his CSAT and
right.
And the men's group and things like that, but
Right.
There's this huge disconnect. Can you talk about that?
Okay, so here's the question. You asked this so well, Tammy. I want you to ask it, but I'll ask it. Who's bringing you that information? Is he saying, the therapist said, the group says, or have you heard it from the therapist? Because I would really wonder, addicts like to sing their own praises all the time. And we certainly like to seduce and manipulate. She heard from the CSAT. So
yeah, I got that impression because of the way it was worded. So
I want to say something to you about this. So we have a treatment center. It's called Seeking Integrity here in California. I think the guys are online today. They usually go to these groups.
Yes.
So I sat with, I don't know how many men there are, 6 or 7 men right now. And I believe that every one of those men who was in a relationship truly loved their partners, or at least most of them. I believe that they truly were committed and care. But when they talk about the way they acted in their addiction, it doesn't sound caring at all. It doesn't sound nice at all. And when I meet these men in group, what I see is a kind person, a nice person, a warm person, a sweet, a smart person, a disconnected, but then I listen to what they did. And I'm like, oh, this person isn't just this, they're all the rest of that too. So in therapy, we can be moving, we can look like we're working on. Remember that you're the person who's closest to him means you're the scariest person to him. And he may be very good at pleasing other people and thinking what they need and being who they want him to be. Maybe he can't fool you, and he knows it. I can't answer the question. This is, we're not with this person, so we're just throwing out a whole bunch of things. It could be anything from he hasn't really figured out how to be a better person to he's not capable of being a better person. It's just a whole bunch of stuff. I will tell you this, though, and I make 12 cents off of every book I put out there, because publishers make 95% of what we sell. But in any case, I wrote a book called Out of the Doghouse, a relationship saving guide for men caught cheating. And the reason I wrote Out of the Doghouse is I have worked with men for 25 years who cheat. And I have never, ever, ever, really, 1,000 men I've never met a man who understands the amount of pain that he's caused a partner by cheating, or has any idea what to do to make it better. Flowers, candy, vacations, that ain't it. I love you and I didn't mean to, that ain't it. It's been 6 months, I haven't done this. Why aren't you over it yet? That ain't it either. So I wrote a book called Out of the Doghouse. I wanted men to understand what it would take to heal their relationship if they wanted to heal it. And throughout that book, I say, this is going to be hard. This is not who you want to be. You're not going to want to do this. Really make sure you want to be in this relationship, because you want to be in it. You're going to have a lot of work to do. So I don't have answers for you, but it's a whole range of things. And probably what I would do if I were you is going to some couples therapy where you can both be present and
Yeah,
both
but
talk to.
they did
Go ahead.
that, and it was that and I just recently asked to take a break from marriage counseling because it was too painful to keep opening up about my pain and get lackluster responses. So
Well, so then there is the possibility that your husband does not have the capacity to be who you want him to be. I think if in couples therapy you're seeing a lack of commitment, response, that could be that he's really broken and he doesn't have the ability, or he's lots of trauma. It could also be that he's not capable. I mean, this is really what we do. No, not trying to sell anything. We do fine, but this is what treatment is about. Wives and partners are very involved in our process, and we sit down. I have sat down with partners and said, I don't think your husband has the capacity for remorse. I don't think this is someone who's really going to get much further than this. And then you spouses get to decide, can I tolerate that? Can I live? Because we can really know and see in a few weeks of treatment really where the person is and where they're going to go, for the most part, because who you are out there is the same person that we see in treatment. So who you are, we get pretty quickly. So this is why do people go to treatment? I just want to say that either they're really unable to stop their behavior despite all the roadblocks they've put in the way, support, meetings, 12-step, or their relationship is so broken and they have so few tools to fix it that they realize they need more help and they want to save their relationship. Most of the men come to treatment because they realized how important the relationship was and they realized how threatened it is. But somewhere along the way, and I said this to guys Tammy the other day, if they're really healthy in the sense that they're going to get better, they move from I'm here to make a relationship better to I don't want to live this way anymore. I don't want to be this person anymore. I don't want to be that guy. And I think that's when the real change comes, not when they're focused on controlling and fixing you so that you'll love them again and accept them, because their problem is not about you. Their problem is their own. And if they get motivated to heal for themselves, whether you stay or not, that's when I see the healing really starting.
I agree. Okay, so next question. Do sex addicts very early in recovery learn things in therapy and repeat them like parrots, but not truly understand them yet? For example, if a therapist says your wife is not to blame for her sex issues, or you are a sex addict, do the addicts sometimes just repeat things but not fully internalize them? Yes.
Gee, Tammy, what do you think?
Yes, and it isn't just sex addicts, it's any addict. That's yeah, like I go to a 12-step program, and like you hear the same things over and over again, and it sinks in at different levels, at different layers. It takes a long time. We are trying to learn to do things completely different than the way we did. So yeah, it's yes, we have to hear ourselves say it, and then at some point we go, oh, I get it, and then can internalize it. So yeah, especially very early on. Absolutely. Thoughts?
And by the way, we get it. And then this is, let me say something about that, Tammy.
Yeah.
Because people don't always understand this, and you're not going to want to hear this. This is a lifelong process. I started my recovery in 1985. I was 26 years old. I wanted to act out last week. Doesn't mean I did it, but this desire to escape difficult feelings, difficult circumstances, a fight, money problems, it's so deep in my primitive brain, really imprinted from an early age, that when things are difficult, I need to go there. That fantasy or whatever it is, that's not going to be unlearned. So we don't ever fix people. What we do is we teach them about the problem and we teach them how to live differently. But it takes, as Tammy said, a very long time to unravel the ways that the things you've been doing, and even more time to understand how you got there. And you addicts, you have to do the work. And you partners, I want to say, and I always say this every week, you did not do anything wrong. You could be the most terrible spouse in the world who makes this man or woman miserable every day, and you never have sex with them, and you gain 300 pounds, and they could leave. They could get a lawyer. They could go play cards. I mean, there are a lot of choices someone can make when they're unhappy in their relationship, other than I'm going to go cheat. That's somebody who wants to go cheat and is looking for justification. So there's nothing, but a lot of times, because we often say, well, if you hadn't done this and you haven't done that, you start to believe us. And I want to say to every partner in this room, there is never, nor has there ever been, any way that you are responsible for our behavior. And I hope that takes some pressure off of you who are remorseful and thinking, well, if we did this and we did that. Mm-mm.
And I agree with that 100%. I shared in my 12-step meeting that, COVID has been difficult for me, but what I found was that the very things that I learned very early in recovery are the same things I need to lean into now. And I have the tools. So it isn't like I completely forgot them or have to relearn them all over again. I have them. And, like Dr. Rob was saying, sure, stuff comes up and you go, well, I can choose that, or I can choose a different way. So we have the capability of looking at things differently and making different choices because we've learned to do that. So I agree, and I hope they, like, ultimately, I feel like if we get recovery, we know when we're vulnerable and we know how to go do something differently. So,
Tammy, it might be useful, I think, at this moment to sort of talk about the stages of what people go through in healing. And
okay.
I mean, talking about treatment is a great way because I know what we take people through. So I think there's a natural progression. The first thing we have to do is work with denial. We have to first help these people look at what they've done, not as have they've looked at it, because the way they looked at it, let them keep doing it. We have to show them in very black and white terms the costs to their children, their family, their friends, and themselves. And then they get really, really shameful. And they say, I've been an awful person. I hate myself. What's wrong with me? And then we start to bring up how they got to be that way, which is often how they grew up. And we move from, you think you're a terrible person, but actually you're a broken person. You think that you're not worth being married to, but actually you need to learn how to become a better person. And hopefully they shift from the shame into motivation. And then we start to teach them, what are the signs that you're in trouble? You call this person, you reach out, you look at this thing online. So we teach them, what are the signs and symptoms that you're in trouble, and not when you've already gotten to the affair partner's house, but how do you track it all the way back to where you first start getting into trouble, that phone call, that thought. And then the last thing we do is we teach people what to do when they're having that thought or that belief, other than doing what they usually do, which is going for it. So there really is a rhythm and a process. I don't think it's any different in recovery, out in the world. You have to understand the degree to which you've hurt people. You have to work past, that means I'm a bad person, to I have a lot of lessons to learn and I've been pretty broken. Then you need to learn, what is all my acting out? What does that look like? What does that feel like? And what motivates me to do it? And then you have to look at how to make it better and how to not do it and do other things instead. And I want to say one more thing about that. We do not recover by not doing things. I really tried to make this impression on that couple today, because this man said, well, I stopped drinking and I stopped sexting, so I'm better. It's not about what we don't do. It's about what we do. Do we go to therapy? Do we go to meetings? Do we go to a treatment center? And for you spouses, you can't believe anything we say. So the only thing you spouses and partners who love us can believe is what we do. Words are nice, but actions are what matter, because our words haven't meant anything. So, and I said this to the partner recently when she said, well, if he acts out again, then I'm going to, take an action. And I thought, well, you may never know. But what you can say, the boundary you can set is, if I don't see you going to 12-step meetings, if I don't see you going to group, if I don't see you going to therapy, if I don't see you going to treatment, these are the markers that a partner is looking for, not what you're not doing, because who knows what they're not doing or whether they're being, but what are they doing? Anyway, you get it. Recovery is really about the actions we take, not the things we stop. That's a given. Anything about this from you, Tammy?
Oh no, I'm tracking with you, and I agree. And it is very challenging. And I know a lot of partners are are concerned about if they set those kind of boundaries, is it going to push him into, acting out? Because he says
Oh,
he's not doing that, but if I set that boundary, isn't that going to make him go do that? So they feel timid, for lack of a better word, about
some
actually,
do.
yeah. So yeah,
But
it's
what
challenging.
Tammy's, saying is that there are times when you partners will ignore your own feelings in order to accommodate this fear that if I get too angry, too sad, if I threaten abandonment, whatever, he's going to or she's going to right back to their behavior because it's my fault for upsetting them. As I said, if they're upset, if they're struggling, they can go to therapists. They can take a time out. There are a lot of things they can do. No one can make your spouse call the affair partner. No one can make them look at porn. That is their choice. And no matter how miserable they are, there are many other choices they could make. And by the way, you partners, I say this every week, your job is three things. One, to be angry, as angry as you want. Two, to really take care of yourself because you've been through a very hard time, massages, time with friends, really taking care of you. And the third thing you need to do is decide whether you want to be with this person or not. That's your job for the first year. You don't have to help them. You don't have to accommodate them. You don't even need to be nice to them considering what they've done to you. Tammy's heard me say this before. I've often worked with men who go to a 12-step meeting and they got 90 days of sobriety together. And everyone in that meeting says, oh, good for you. I'm so proud of you. It's so great. And then they go to their therapy group. I'm sitting there as a therapist. They hold up their little 90-day, I got 90 day. We give them little chips. And everyone in the group's like, dude, you did great. Or, wow, I'm so proud of you. I'm impressed. And I'm like, wow, this is really, you should hold this and keep it in your pocket. And then they go home to their spouse and they say, look, honey, I got 90 days. And that spouse says, big effing deal. You cheated on me for 12 years. Why should I be happy that for 90 days you haven't been with sex workers? And that is correct. It is not the partner's job, even no matter how hard we are working, to turn around and say, oh, honey, you're doing a great job. Your job is to stay with what you feel and what you've been through. Let us validate the addict. Let the people in group, the 12-step, we are there for them. We're 100% in. We run groups and support. But while you're in this situation as a couple, the person who's caused the problem needs to turn to other people than you for their support, men or whatever their same gender is. How could I lean into you when you're the one I hurt? I can't. And if I ask you to take care of me on any level, then I'm kind of being abusive because I'm saying, stop feeling what you're feeling and focus on me for a change, but I haven't earned it. So, yeah, tell me anything else in that direction
No,
before?
that was, yeah, no, yes. So
Great.
take care of you, get support. We have partner support groups. Join us. Okay.
They're free.
Next,
They're free.
yes. And next question is from a betrayed partner. Please explain more about dissociation and compartmentalization of the addict. What tools for each side do you recommend to get through this, not dealing with the obvious?
Well, that's, again, a whole bunch of questions, and they kind of mix together between what people out in the world might think and what a therapist might think. So let me see if I can parse this a little bit. Oh, I was looking for the question. I might have lost it, Tammy.
Dissociation and compartmentalization of the addict.
So the way I think about this, I think, is that this doesn't start with addiction. This starts with something that happens to us when we're very young. And oftentimes, before we can even remember things. So what this comes out of, not always, but most of the time, is someone who had to learn in early childhood that they couldn't rely on their caregivers, that their caregivers were arguing or absent or didn't want to hear about it or only were focused on themselves. Or for some reason, that child ended up not believing and not feeling that they had people to always turn to whenever they needed anything, which is how every child should feel. So they learn, these young children, that they have to feel better somehow. They have to be able to tolerate the lack of love, the confusion. So we find a way to go into our heads and disappear. When I was a child, I'm very, I don't know what you call it. I like to read. That's how my brain works. And so I had an encyclopedia in my room, a little kid's encyclopedia. I read it forwards and back, forwards and back. When I was reading, and to this date, when I'm reading, you can set off an alarm and I don't hear you because I can go so deeply into those words. That's how I learned to survive. I used to hang out and look out my window and watch the cars that would go by, and I would check off the LTDs from I would reward myself. Oh, saw that. In other words, I learned at an early age to go into fantasy for survival. Survival from what? Survival from difficult feelings, from difficult circumstances, from not knowing how to handle, because you're only 5. That way of living goes throughout the lifespan. So now what I've learned in the earliest stages of life is that when things are difficult, I need to disappear. Dissociation means going into my head or going into a completely different set of circumstances so that I can escape from these feelings. If I said to you, does our acting out eventually look like dissociation? Sure, because I completely remove myself from my anchors, from my reality, and I go off and I do this completely disconnected thing and I disappear into it, not because it's really the thing, but because of what it provides me, which is a means of escape. There isn't any difference for the addict on some level, whether I was reading and reading and reading and escaping to that, or whether I go see sex workers. It's all the same thing. So dissociation and the ability to disappear comes out of an early learned experiences of survival. Unfortunately, at a later time in life, they start working against you, because when you really want to connect and you want to be open and you want to share your feelings, that's not there. Either the ability and the motivation or the belief that it will bring anything. We don't honestly believe as addicts that you can do anything to make us feel better. We think we have to do it all on our own, and we have to do it with a lot of control and management, and we don't really trust that other people can soothe us, comfort us. I mean, we may say we do, but when push comes to shove, we're the only ones that we believe can make ourselves feel better. And so we jump into disappearing as a way to do that. And you can call that dissociation. You can call it what happens when we're getting ready to act out, but it's all really the same thing.
So compartmentalization, and I'll put my 2 cents on that, but compartmentalization, Dr. Rob talked about that a while ago. It's like, I love you, but I would be hurting you if, if I let myself feel that I was hurting you when I went and acted out. So I have to keep those 2 parts. I always say siloed. So those silos don't touch. And it's very uncomfortable for addicts when we start having to have those silos touch and go, oh my gosh, I love this person and I've hurt them, and how do I deal with that? So compartmentalization and not living congruently is, so the dissociation is absolutely, that's what we're going for, but compartmentalization to me feels like how we are able to go do that and keep the,
Sanity,
keep the feelings.
Yes,
keep the feelings of, I'm doing this, I'm justified in doing this, I'm doing whatever, and, I'm going to come back to the partner that I care about. And these 2 things are not at all connected. So, and
I want to just say that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tammy. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to go to the next part of the question. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just want to say one thing. One of the greatest forms of this that I see, what Tammy's talking about, is the words about their partner. Let's say I'm married to a woman. What she doesn't know won't hurt her. I think that's an incredibly good form of splitting, denying, because of course you guys feel our lack of intimacy, you feel how distant we are, you feel whatever's going on, but we think if they don't know the facts, then I can keep this box over here and I can keep that box over there. And by the way, we are very invested in keeping these things separate, because we know what would happen if you found out. And or we would know what happens if you completely dive into that and give the rest of our lives up. So we like to put ourselves into boxes, and there the train shall meet, because if they come crashing together, well, that's usually when we see you in a treatment program.
Yes. And it says, what tools for each side do you recommend to get through this not dealing with the obvious? The treatment program is a great way to start, unpacking all of that. So, but it still comes down to, you have to learn to be able to tolerate really uncomfortable, unpleasant feelings.
And I guess I have a saying for you, and I say this a lot, the guys in treatment really like this saying for some reason: reality wins. If the reality is that this person is able to open up, willing to commit, they're trying and really, really trying, then that's going to be your reality. And if they're playing at it to soothe, to comfort you, but they really are wanting to keep the double life, reality will win, and they will get caught again, or they'll end up in the same place. So you can count on the fact that if we're still doing it, eventually you will know. And by the way, I want to say to you, Tammy, I was talking to a spouse today. She didn't know what her husband was doing, but she knew. She knew he was distant. She knew he was lying. She knew he was rolling over when they used to cuddle, every little sign. So you addicts, by the way, who are married to a man or a woman, I hear this all the time. He must be a magician. She must be a witch, because they always know when I've done it. I can come home on Tuesday and they didn't say anything to me. And Wednesday, they're like, what's wrong? Well, you seem distant. How do they know that? And the answer is, we're not that good. We think that we can come home on Wednesday after acting out and exactly act like we did on Tuesday. We show all these signs that we don't see, but our partners pick up on it right away. And of course, and they will push that down in the beginning. Well, that's not real. And we encourage them. Oh, that's not true. That's not what's going on. And then we make you doubt yourselves, which is called gaslighting.
Okay, next question. Let me get this one. So how long does it take to really heal from sexual addiction? I have been acting out for over 15 years with chat rooms and porn. I'm extending other programs for over 25 years. I am just starting a 12-step program. I meant porn for 25 years and attending a 12-step program and other meetings in couples therapy. I've been married 48 years. I am willing to do the work now. Can I save my marriage?
So what was the first
The first
question
part
in
was,
that?
how long does it really take to heal from sex addiction? Been acting out for, well, married for almost 50 years, been looking at
So
porn for 25 years. Can he save his marriage?
to me, the key question is heal. Like, what do you mean by that? Do you mean that it's going to go away and never come back? No. Does it mean that you, when you have the desire to do it, you have new tools and new ways of living and a greater level of honesty? Sure. But we don't ever heal addiction. Addiction is a form of mental illness. And I can tell you how that works. If you're depressed, you relapse into depression over stress. When strong emotional things come up, you crawl in bed instead of facing them. I mean, depression comes out over a certain set of circumstances. And guess when we act out? When we're stressed out, when we're worried about problems, so if you look at it that way, we have a chronic problem that is a brain problem that unfortunately they just don't have any pills for. And so we have to learn and to live with the fact that this isn't going to go away. And I want to say that, and so do you spouses. You have to learn, you have to make a decision. Do you want to live with someone who's going to be struggling with this the rest of their lives? And I would say that you can, provided we're honest with you, provided we don't ever leave you wondering what we're doing when we say, if I can come back to you and say, yesterday, I got to be honest, I stopped at a massage parlor and I let somebody, and I paid someone to do X, Y, or Z. If someone tells you that, I got to say that you partners are going to be destroyed. But there's going to be a little part of you that says, well, isn't this interesting? Because now I'm hearing the truth. And before I was lied to. And so in the way, does the problem go away? No. Can you stop for long periods of time? Yes. But what's even more important than that is what we named our treatment program, Integrity. I had a treatment program called the Sexual Integrity Program. Now I have a program called Seeking Integrity. This is one of my favorite words, and it speaks to compartmentalization. Because when you are putting your lives in boxes or your life in boxes, you are disintegrated. People look at you and sometimes they see this person, sometimes they see that person. Some of the people would be shocked to know that you did this. That's not integration. Integration is, I'm the same person all the time. You may not know everything about me, but if you did, you wouldn't be surprised. I've been married 20 years and there isn't anything that my spouse doesn't know. Nothing. And you know how wonderful it is to come home and know that I don't have to lie, that I don't have to hide, that I don't have to worry that I'm going to be found out. And by the way, to you sex addicts that go a little deeper, it's so nice in recovery to know an itch is just an itch. Because when I had an itch, when I came home, I was like, oh, do I have this disease, that disease? Now I know I have been bitten by a mosquito and I don't have to live with those fears all the time. I used to get sick a lot, cold after cold after cold. I thought I was just that kind of person. No, I was acting out with all these different people. I was exposing myself. How nice it is now that I actually don't get colds very often. Well, now I wear masks. So, so a lot of the anxiety and worry and inability to connect goes away when we become integrated and start having our words and our actions match up.
So I'm going to tag on. So I started off before Dr. Rob was able to join us and said if you pursue your recovery with the same energy that you pursued your acting out, you'll do really well. But it's going to take a lot. I hear that you're going to a 12-step and you're doing couples therapy. I would encourage you to focus on recovery for your addiction. Ideally, we would love to help you. We've helped, guys from young 20s to over
70
70.
something.
I have a guy who called me the other day and he's 81 and he wants to come in April. I was like, rock on, So, I mean, it's not too late, but
It's
those are really old patterns. And if you think, with all due respect, that just going to a 12-step meeting and doing a little bit of couples therapy is going to rapidly give you the healing that you're looking for, I don't see that. It's a much higher level of help. Dr. Rob talked about it earlier too. It's like we want to stop the behaviors, but addressing those things so it doesn't just turn into the whack-a-mole of like, well, now I'm eating a chocolate cake every night, or I'm doing whatever. So I would invite you to explore a deeper level of healing.
And by the way, there was something else in that question about a long relationship and can like
48 years. Yeah.
So someone who's lived with you 48 years, and I assume you weren't 10 when you got married, so you're probably in your late 60s or older. Here's the truth. The couples that break up around these kinds of issues are most often couples that haven't been together very often. They haven't established a whole financial, spiritual, kids, church, work. They don't have all of these roots with each other. And most often, if the guy's been acting out, for example, I see a woman who's been married for 2 years and she sees the road ahead and she can say, I'm not up for this ride for the next 35 years. But those of you who've been living and working together for 15, 20, 30 years, it's very hard to say, well, I'm just going to throw all that out and start again. So I think the reality is like 90% of you couples stay together, and most specifically, the ones who've been together a very long time. Do you think that your 65 or 70-year-old spouse wants to go out and start again? Do you think that there aren't parts of you that they still love and care about? And obviously they do, because they've been with you so long. And by the way, it probably meant, well, you've spent the majority of your adult lives together. You've lived with each other longer than you live with your parents or anybody else in your whole life. Addiction, I say this to the guys in treatment a lot. We want to see ourselves in black and white terms. They're good, they're bad, they're right, they're wrong. One of the things that spouses go through when you find out about us is this thing that we call ambivalent love. Meaning sometimes you look over us and we're the person you always love. We're the person who's playing with the kids, or we're the person who's making you dinner. And you just think for a moment, wow, and then, I don't know, you see an ad for a bikini and you're like, oh, well, those are the women or men, that's who we slept with. And then you're furious at us and you hate us. And it's very hard for you partners because you have to go back and forth between I love them and I hate them. I love them and I hate them. And that's part of your craziness. Not that you're crazy. That's part of what you inherit from us when we have left you loving us, but then all of a sudden we show you the other side. So the bottom line about this is I do think that most couples can find a way out, no matter how, and especially the ones who've been married a very, very long time. 48 years is several lifetimes. Any thoughts, Tammy?
Yeah, I would invite your spouse to join the Old Lady Posse tomorrow morning at 8:30 in the morning. That is, they named it, but that is specifically for women of a certain age who have been with their person for a longer period of time. And everything we do is from a prodependence lens, not codependence, which I mentioned earlier. It's not you're bad, you're an enabler, you're codependent. It's like you love somebody who's broken, and there's support for the partners, on our platform, sexandrelationshiphealing.com, to get that support for them while you hopefully work on you. So next question. How are addicts' abusive behavioral issues towards his spouse specifically addressed in our treatment center? Example, verbal abuse, physical threats and intimidation, anger, yelling, etc.
So one of the things that I've always done in treatment, no matter what program I was creating or working in, is I really believe that if you're in a relationship, the voice of your partner needs to be there. I run things maybe different than some other folks. I want the spouses involved from the beginning. I want you to be online with us, and maybe with your spouse, you're going to need to hear from the therapist on a couple of times a week. What's going on? I was going to set that up for something. Hold on just a second. Can you tell me? I seem to be losing the question. So
How are addicts' abusive behavioral issues
Right.
towards a spouse, including verbal, physical
Right.
threats, intimidation, anger, yelling?
So when, let's say, Mr. X comes into treatment at Seeking Integrity, and Mrs. X has this history of what's happened, I don't believe, it's not I don't believe, I think that the person who's in treatment, the addict, they have their own way of looking at this. They don't necessarily think they've been abusive. They think that they did the right thing. They don't think, we have a whole warped way of looking at life and our relationships. So it's really about, gosh, tell me that question again. I want to get that moment. The word is first sentence.
How do addicts' abusive behavioral
Right.
issues towards
So
a
what we
spouse?
do in treatment is we ask you often before Mr. X comes into treatment, or whether your partner's, well, we treat men. So, and we ask you spouses to write a letter, maybe a couple of pages. It's part of treatment. What have you been through? What were your experience of physical abuse, emotional abuse? And you write all that down. How were you lied to? What has your life been like? What has happened since you found out? And what we do is we ask them to read that letter, or we read that letter in group therapy. So we physically bring in your voice, literally your words about what you've been through, and everyone in treatment has to hear it. And so whatever you've been through, it's very clear that you have a very clear vision of what it's been, and you are letting us know and the group know. And by the way, it is most frequently the case when we read those letters, I know you're not used to them, but half the men in the group start crying. It's interesting, Tammy, I just want to say this to you. Years ago, I brought a young colleague, a young intern, into one of the men's groups. And after the group, she said to me, I didn't know men could have feelings. I didn't know
Wow.
men cried,
Yeah.
When they hear your words of how you have hurt them, and you're not there going like this, but they're just hearing it, that's how they learn about and once we hear it in the group, then we start talking about, well, what is abuse? There are lectures that we have on victimization and abuse, and we talk to them about what is abuse. Here are the actual things that are abusive. I can say to you, shut the F up. Doesn't seem abusive to me, but it is. One more thing. There was one of the couples I talked to recently, I heard this person had been lying for 30 years, and the ways he lied and the ways he gave his spouse hope and then walked away. I basically said to her, he's been beating you up. There is no difference between him whacking you across the face or him betraying you and hurting you emotionally. You're an abused spouse. And I think not all of you are in that situation, but he would never say, he would say, I never hit her. I was never abusive. She didn't know about most of this stuff. How could I be abusive? Because every time she came to you or he came to you and said, I want more, where are you? And you lied, or you said, I'm really here and I'm not. It's incredibly abusive. You're denying someone their own reality. And if you do it long enough, guess what happens to your spouses? You lose your minds. And then we addicts say, oh, look, they're crazy. See why you never can win, you spouses, unless we are dedicated to healing. And couples heal. They really do.
I'm going to jump around in case we run out of time, but this one is really, they're all important. Don't get me wrong. 3 years from D-Day, our daughter, who is 12, is picking up on our toxic relationship. When is a good time to let her know what's going on with the SA? Also, what is the best way to tell her?
And did we say how old their daughter was?
12. So 3 years from D-Day, our daughter,
Okay.
who is 12, is picking up on our toxic relationship.
Okay.
What to do? So
let me be as clear as I can possibly be. Never, never, ever tell your children, ever. Why would you want to tell, especially at 12, when a child is formulating their own sexuality? Why would you ever want to tell a child about their parents' sex life? They will never forget that. They'll always have, when would you want a child to have images or thoughts or feelings about your sex life? That's not children are not meant to handle that. That's none of their business. You can say to them, Mom and Dad have been fighting. Mom and Dad, you're right. What you're feeling is correct. And most importantly, it's not your fault. There's nothing because kids will take it on, and we still love you. We both love you. This is our problem. But you don't tell them about the problem. And by the way, some of you spouses, and I think this is unfortunate, in your anger, will go to your children and say, I can't believe what your mom did, or I can't believe, you know what your dad did? And that is never going to leave them. Because, and by the way, it hurts your marriage or relationship, because what happens then is they start thinking, I don't want to talk to dad. Look what he did to mom. Or I don't want to talk to mom. They shouldn't be. And they start interfering and taking sides. And what a nightmare and mess that is. We had a couple Tam we worked with a while ago. They had a bunch of kids. One of our first folks, I think you probably remember this. And part of why they couldn't get it figured out was every time they started to move toward each other, one of their kids would say to mom, how could you do that, mom, after what he did that to you? Or they would write a letter to dad saying, don't you dare talk to mom after what you. So the kids became an impediment to an impediment. Is that right? The
That's
kids
right.
interfered with their process. So number one, we never tell any children. I had a client, I think I have a client in treatment who is some 22-year-old. What do I say to her? Nothing. Doesn't matter what age they are. No child needs to know about their parents' sex life, but they do need validation for what they're feeling, which is, yeah, you hear mom and dad fighting. Yeah, you feel the tension. Of course you do. We are struggling. They need to have their reality validated, but they don't need to know the details ever. And if you want someone to talk to take your side, find a therapist, find a friend, find a pastor, but don't go to your children, because that asks them to become your parent, and that's not their job.
Okay. So my wife, ground zero D-Day 2 weeks ago, wants to know how to make the pain end. She knows essentially everything. I always hate when I hear that, because it's like essentially everything. I did, and is filled with pain because of it.
Okay, I have a question for you though, Tammy. We supposedly were supposed to stop 15 minutes ago, so we're just running over. Is that correct? I
Yes.
just want to
Will you answer? Well, because we did. So will you answer this one, and then we'll end? And
yeah. It's not that. I just want to make sure that. So one of the things I just want to say to you guys that we have to role model is boundaries. When I'm in treatment, the group needs to end on time. You need, if we don't model that, this isn't about Tammy. She is respecting boundaries. We're going to do this for an hour. That's what we committed to. It's just move forward a little bit.
Right.
Because I was running late. But if we just went an hour and a half, we'd be telling you that we're sloppy, or that we don't pay attention, or that you can get away with stuff. So we actually model in treatment and even here what we expect of you. So Tammy, to the last question.
Yes. My wife, ground zero D-Day 2 weeks ago, wants to know how to make the pain end. She knows essentially everything, which, like I said, huge red flag for me. I did, and is filled with pain because of it.
Well, I wrote this book called Out of the Doghouse, a relationship saving guide for men caught cheating. And one of the things that I ask in there is, how long do you think it's going to take your wife or husband or whoever it is to get over it? And 9 times out of 10, you say 6 weeks, 6 months, 9, and of course, by then you're going to your spouse and saying, I'm tired of seeing that angry face when I come home. When are you going to, and my experience is it can take 12 to 18 months, provided we're doing all the right stuff. We're not lying. We're not cheating. We're being honest. We're going to 12. So we're doing what we need to do. It can take a year or more for that spouse to move off of, I'm not sure whether I want to be with you or not. And by the way, that is our job to give them the grace. The worst thing that you guys can do, or you women can do who've cheated and acted out, please don't apologize. Please don't ask for forgiveness. Just do your work. Because when you apologize, you don't know when you apologize, you're asking for that person you love to think about letting it go, or think about moving past it. And that's not fair. And it's really unfair for you to ask for forgiveness, because they need as long as they need. Now, I will say this. If about 18 months have gone by and you've really been trying, and that spouse is at the same level of anger that they were at the beginning, that's not healthy either. If you're really doing the right stuff, and that partner, what I often will say to partners when it's been a year and a half, is, do you realize that at a certain point, your anger is counterproductive? At a certain point, if we are really working and doing everything we can, then we're actually beginning to be ready to be available to you, and your anger pushes us away. Not that we don't deserve it, but a year of anger, a year and a half, at a certain point, you guys also need to de-escalate and begin to believe that the process is going to change. Otherwise, it's like again, like whack-a-mole. So I'm angry. You're like, you never quite get it together. By the way, you don't have to forgive. I don't know that and you don't have to forget. You, in fact, I wouldn't encourage you to, nor could you, but you do need to find a place where you can understand that this person you love is deeply troubled and deeply broken. It's not your fault. You didn't make it happen. They had the problem before they ever met you, and that you're going to have to find a way to come to peace with it. Doesn't mean you forgive, doesn't mean you forget, but that you understand that you have more together than just this, and that the meaning that you share and have shared is can't be destroyed by simply with this. Yeah. Anything else, Tammy?
Just a quick on that, because it sounds like I shared everything. There was no therapeutic process with it. And so out of the doghouse, yes, but get professional help and get support for each of you, because trying to put the pieces back together again, she's shattered. I'm just, she's shattered. So it's going to take time.
And I want to briefly say something about that. Spouses, you often say to us, I want to know everything. I want to know everything. And then when you know everything, you have lots of you guys. So we think if we just answer this person's question, if we just tell them, then they're going to feel better. But you're not going to feel better no matter what we say or how many questions we answer, because we've ruined your life. So ultimately, we addicts, and this is really tough, have to say, no, I'm not going to tell you anymore until you're in therapy, until you're getting support, because I refuse to devastate you with all this information. The truth is, I can tell you everything and I'm going to feel better. Woo, I got that off my chest. Now I have integrity, but we have destroyed the person that we told. So even though you spouses believe if you know everything, you're going to feel better, you're not. The last thing I want to say about that is a lot of times when you spouses, you go through our cell phone bills, you go through our wallets, you go through our browsers, you look everywhere you can. Some of you hire private detectives, and we often think, oh, well, that means that they're just looking to prove that I'm still doing it so they can go after me. I don't think that's what it means. I think partners are looking for a reason to stay. And they're hoping that they're not going to find another thing that condemns this relationship. And they have to protect themselves. They're going to look through everything to see if it's safe to stay, not to put another nail in your coffin. So when they're, and one more thing about this. I say this a lot, not recently. The opposite of love is not hate. If your spouse freaking hates you, they're still in there with you. The opposite of love is indifference. It's when that person says, I don't care what they do. I'm kind of done with this. I'm out of there. That's when love is gone. When they're furious, it means they're still in there. So don't take an angry spouse's, the feeling of that as this is over, they don't love me. They're still passionately involved with you. If they are passionate about their feelings, when they have moved on is when you need to worry. Thank you, guys.
On that note, we're going to end. So thank you all for the great questions. Thank you, Dr. Rob. I'm so glad we all got connected. See you next week, everybody.
And
Bye.
just to say it, Tammy, we're going to do this Christmas week and New Year's week, right? We're going to keep doing this on Mondays.
Yes.
Right?
And
okay.
I heard Birdie told me that you are going to be on In the Rooms on Friday night, on Christmas night. So
both Christmas and New Year's. Yes. I mean, that's a gift to me to do that. So of course I'm going to be there.
Okay.
Thank you all for showing up.
Thank you.
Again, the podcast, I'm not selling anything. I don't make any
free.
money, but it can be so helpful.
Yes.
Thanks, Tammy. You guys have a great evening.
Bye.